Today we are going to check out just how easy it would be to have a copy of the Monterey Strat done. I have a friend who has had a Strat built by pre-CBS Strats. I'm going to show you a little bit of the story. I'm not going to say who he is because I don't want to get anybody into trouble, but this is the story of his beautiful blue Strat.
First off, here are a few images of my replica. It is a 1963 LPB replica built by Dominic Kench. As you can see, this is a pretty convincing replica. Here are some of the build images that will show you more of the vintage spec details. He talks about these on the web, which in my opinion are also the tells. I have had a lot of guitars, including some fantastic vintage ones. I love vintage guitars with Les Paul Juniors, Strats and Esquires being my faves. I owned a 55 Junior, a 61 Double Cut Junior, a 62 Esquire and a 64 refinished Strat, as well as tons of nice high-end guitars. I've had more than 20 PRS customs, including private stocks, but mainly vintage, pre-1990. I had a deal with them, and a fantastic John Cruz Strat, plus the Russian Keebler Les Paul, built from the John Cato blueprints. This was the second replica I commissioned. The first was a 1959 burst I had made in Russia, by a guy that is quite well known, through Dr. Nitro's YouTube channel. It would be also fair to say the Strat is way closer to the real thing, than the burst was, though it was still a sweet guitar. I found Dominic's site through a search on the net in 2017, and ordered the guitar sometime later that month. Dom called me on Skype and we discussed the spec. I ordered a 1963 Strat, Lake Placid Blue. I told him I wanted fairly lightweight. He told me it would be anything under 7.5 pounds. He also told me that the vintage Strats, the trem and other components are a touch heavier than the replicas. I had a pre-master built John Cruz, Mary Kay Strat at 6.9 pounds. That had a mega flamed neck. I paid Dom in full, €4,500, and he started building. Nearly 5 years later, I took delivery of the guitar. He is a bit haphazard in the way he builds them. You can see the QA stamp in the neck? Fender used many different ones, but Dom's are always the same. The OK mark and paint stick. The paint stick is on bare wood. Some 1963 would have yellow Fullerplast. Some LPB Fenders would have desert sand as the undercoat, or Inca silver. Here we have white. It's legit, but it's the only way he does them. The body has dowels, and nail marks in exactly the correct places. However, they are quite noticeable. It's like the vintage details are emphasized, to jump at you. In the trem cavity there is a slight nick, in the upper left corner, where the router ran on. It is there on many pre-CBS guitars. But here it is always more noticeable, of all examples I have seen. My contours are on the rounder side. I asked for that as I has seen and played a couple of less boxy examples at Ed Roma's in Vegas. In hindsight, if I was trying to fool, boxier is way more common. When the guitar arrived it had the following hardware. Real single-line Clusons. Dom had issues with the first frets and regretted it. I dressed the frets a few times, and they are great. They look almost vintage, but they are very slightly larger. You can tell it has been re-fretted. This is also a blessing as a 60-year-old guitar would have had more than one re-fret. Strap button screws and jack plate were very decent. It had no backplate. The trem was the Dave England trem. It's a beauty. These used to be a secret weapon of the fakers. It is spot on in materials. Crazy Parts also sell them, but a cheaper version. Mark Foley now sells the same trem, without the pre-CBS saddles. On mine it looked weird. It had the sintered top edge. I found out mine was built from some of his 54 spec parts, with the better pre-CBS saddles, and a 54 plate. I swapped the plate, with the 60s one from Crazy Parts. If I put real saddles on it, it would be impossible to tell. How you can tell though? The Ds on the real Fender look like Os, with very flat sides. The replica has rounded fronts on the Ds. They also lack the tool marks on the bottom of the saddles. Mine has the top tool marks. The Pickguard was a disappointment. Dom promised a lashing celluloid guard, but it came with a nice real-looking plastic guard. Probably Crazy Parts. The covers were pure vintage. The guard was a major disappointment, as they go for $500 and up for the replica. I bought one at one time. I will tell you now, it is not the best one out there. The switch tip and knobs are real nice. He casts polystyrene replicas for molds of real ones. It's hard to tell them apart. They got replaced later. The pickups were very hot. Pretty decent, correct polarity, and all in all decent. The pots were CTS very basic. I had them replaced. Same with the switch. Got replaced with the Rewind Electronics Vintage Spec 1. along with the wire replaced with Lux radio wire. As it turns out, the 7 untinned strands make a difference. So that was the guitar after 5 years, and having to wait till site's treaty rules changed to get it.
So here's the actual finished guitar, and I think you'll agree it is an amazing job.
I spent an age getting the guitar looking and playing as good if not better than a real Strat. I have now achieved that, but it was not cheap. I aged the guitar by playing it and exposing it to the sun. It's hot as hell here. The once white neck is now orange, the flames on the neck are more visible. I have nearly worn through the finish on the lower edges. The rest is the neck, especially as it had real clusons on from day dot. They would fool people easily, with its orange dot markers and disappearing side dots. The body was harder. It took tons of sun to get it to change to the greenish color, and a lot of parts were not up to spec. Except the neck plate, which, again, I think Dave made, and he does not see them. I put a real 60s shim in the neck. I changed all the wiring to vintage spec, studying picks of real ones to get the look of the routing right. I had several different sets of pickups in it. Mark Foley 60s, which I took out after 2 days and put DOMs back in. Then a few others. Finally I found a builder in Spain. They seemed to be on it for pre-CBS there. I realized that the reason it did not have the rich deep overtones was not the guitar, which was resonant as hell. After studying it, I realized the capacitance is super important, hence trying Mark Foley's. However, this capacitance comes from the wire, coupled with the magnets, which in those days had more cobalt in them, hence the lower pull in the strings. Oscar Garcia, at General Vintage, made me a set of his Stevie Ray 63 pickups, aged real magnets from the era. Genuine Essex wire, which is the same as Fender used in 63, it has the right capacitance. Where it made a huge difference was the in-between sounds. They are now nearly as loud as the in-phase sounds, but with the quack. So you have Leigh between neck and middle, and Dire Straits in middle bridge. The bridge is not ice pick sounding, they also balance well. The pots and other electronics, these came with Lux radio wire. It's the only correct ones you can find, Western vintage telephone wire, which is what Leo used. Other stuff for giggles, the rewind stuff is Ace. I used their real rubber bushings. They have a fatter look, the color is different, and they are stiffer. It's an obsession, I know, but this guitar is absolutely vintage spec. Pickguard shield, no one makes a good one. Even Oscar's is not right. The best is the custom shop Fender one, that they no longer sell. They go for $100 up as a 60s model, the 62 is readily available. Plastic is a problem, Dom's plastic was so-so. I paid $550 for a lashing guard, when one eventually turned up, but grew tired of it when I could not age it naturally. They are a blue-gray, which looks weird, but is apparently correct. Eventually this got replaced by a real nitro one from Oscar. It was great, a lot more of a bevel. I have researched heavily, and you will find pre-CBS with both 45° and 30° edge bevels on guitars. Though the 30° could be shrinkage. Oscar's was every bit as good as the lashing. He went a bit odd on the aging, but with some buffing of the front and rear, being careful not to take it back to new. It now has discoloration, in all the right places, a shiny backside like the real deal, and the lashing. He also makes hips backplates, pickup covers with correct tool marks, switch tips, and knobs, all very hard to tell from real deal. Even under black light, as they light up like real ones. Lastly, the silly things no one gets right, you have 3 screw sizes. The back plate, pick guard, and the jack socket are larger. I got all the ones I was missing, off Reverb. Last is decals, none of the best are accurate. They are too gold, which can be fixed with bronze paint, a steady hand, and humid environment, where it will go a browny green. But on the 63 at least the patent numbers end in a line. Whereas on the real one, the patent numbers are slightly centered, below the synchronized tremolo text, so if you see the 0 line up, it's a fake. On my guitar, I messed up the decal, and Dom kindly sent me a new one. So kind of looks like it has been replaced, with a black light, which would be a way around that question. Lastly, note the mark on the back of the headstock. It is where the guitar was left hanging on a peg, and the rubber eats the nitro. Many real ones get these at the factory. When I bought it, it was wrong, but it's a legit detail now.
So there we are. It just goes to show how easy it would be to have a copy of the Monterey Strat made with all the details on it and not missing details or having erroneous details on the guitar. Let me know what you think, as always, in the comment section. I really would be interested in reading it, and I'll be back with the best content I can just as soon as I can. In the meantime, you take good care.